Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Quick round of introductions. Eva needs none, so we'll just move right on from her. But let me take a moment to introduce really our star of the show, and that would be Jessica Roy. She is an assistant editor on the utility team at the Los Angeles Times, and her desk is a unique beat that you might think from the name of it. Covers a whole lot of things dealing with electric companies and wastewater treatment plants, but you would be extraordinarily wrong. In fact, she focuses on service journalism for her Southern California audience. And as her Twitter bio best describes it, she writes, "News you can use." Quick introduction. My name is Jason Cradaville. I'm head of public policy and external affairs at a company called Centrelink. We're an identity verification company that works a lot with financial institutions to stop fraud at the point of application. And I also have the distinct honor and privilege of being one of Eva's board members at the ITRC.
So make me look good, you guys. That's my boss.
Before we start, I think, let me just take a moderator privilege for 30 seconds and step back for a second. So folks, I think everybody in this room, it's safe to say, cares a whole lot about identity. Some of us, like me, are actually in the business of helping to verify identities. And for folks like me, success is often measured by things like how much fraud we're able to stop for the financial institutions that we work with, which usually gets quantified in terms of dollars saved or charged off accounts mitigated. Now, don't get me wrong, that's important stuff, right? But there's another way to think about it. For identity verification providers, when we help a bank not open an account because we've flagged that it's based on a case of identity theft, we're not only helping that lender make a good decision, but there's also a person behind that who probably doesn't know that we exist, may not even know that they're a victim of identity theft at the time we're helping our bank partner make that decision. And we're helping them by stopping a bad situation from possibly getting much, much worse. And that's what this panel's about. It's recognizing that there's a real human impact to identity theft that's often overlooked. Which brings us to Jessica. She has a story to tell. It started back in 2019, and like all juicy stories, it started with a night out on the town. It was quickly followed by new phones. She stole a Tesla, very exciting, opened a bunch of bank accounts, wrote a lot of bad checks, and even helped a friend post bail, which they then skipped. But of course, that wasn't her. So why don't you tell us your story?
Hello. Great. Hello. Yes. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, I had an incredibly exciting 2019. I went, on an awesome crime spree. It was great. I opened a couple bank accounts. Yeah, the Tesla, great, amazing. I was at a bar. It was the day after Thanksgiving in 2018. And at the end of the night, I went to pay. My wallet was gone. I thought, shoot. By the time I called my bank the next morning, they'd swiped my card at a couple gas stations. They'd used Cash App to pay an Uber driver. I canceled everything. My bank, made me whole on all of that. I went to the DMV that week and got a new driver's license. I went to the SFPD and reported my wallet stolen, thinking maybe they would turn the wallet in and I would get like the wallet back, and great. And then so an annoyance, but I kind of thought that was the end of it. If you had said to me, "Hey, Jessica, you should freeze your credit. You should be on the lookout because somebody could steal your identity," I would have said, no. I only had my driver's license and a couple credit cards in there. I'm a financially savvy person. I don't reuse passwords. I have two-factor set up on everything. I have credit monitoring. I have alerts set up. I would have said, I think I'm okay. In early January of 2019, I started getting letters in the mail. Congratulations on my new Bank of America checking and savings account. Congratulations on my new Wells Fargo checking and savings account. Following up on my Target credit card application, following up on my Macy's card application, I got emails from my bank saying, "Hey, we noticed you changed your mobile number. Hey, we noticed you changed your password. We noticed you've added a new email to your account." And then from my credit monitoring, "Is this inquiry yours? We noticed a new line of credit. We noticed this new line of credit." And I realized what must have happened. So I sprang into action. I filed the FTC Identity Theft.gov report. I filed a report with the IC3. I went online and froze my credit with all three bureaus. I left a voicemail for the SFPD saying, I'm going to need that report. And then I went to call Wells Fargo and Bank of America. And I thought, they are going to be so grateful. They are going to be so glad that I am tipping them off these are fraudulent accounts and, close those, resolve this. I hit a roadblock right away, which was the paperwork I'd been sent did not have the account numbers on it for, security purposes. So when you call, you get an automated menu that says, thanks for calling Bank of America, enter your account number to proceed. And I didn't have that. So I entered a bunch of zeros. And yeah, you get stuck at like the end of the phone queue. So I would wait on the phone for 45 minutes and then finally speak to someone. And again, I thought they would be grateful that I was kind of doing them a favor. That's like not the vibe that I got. I was kind of put through the ringer on all of it. They sent me all this stuff. And every time I had to call back, they never said to me like, hey, you should call our fraud line specifically. I was just calling the 1-800 number that's at the bottom of the account paperwork. And every time, I got shuffled to the back of the queue. So I thought, okay, well, I've done my due diligence. I've shut things down, and that's kind of the end of it. It was not the end of it. Over the next few months, I would get piles of mail. Every day, there was something new in my mailbox about that they'd applied for a credit. I got a lot of notices that were like, hey, we see you applied for a credit card with us. Thank you. You might not know this, but your credit's frozen. Here's how to unfreeze it and then follow back up with us, and we'll be able to open that for you. There was never anything that I remember seeing that said, you must have frozen your credit, and here's how to report that this was fraud. It was all like, obviously you've made a mistake and you definitely want a Kohl's credit card. Let's see. Oh, I had to leave 6 voicemails with the San Francisco Police Department to get a copy of my police report, and they only sent it to me when I filed a FOIA request with my LA Times email. I started getting letters from debt collectors. That was my first time ever being sent to collections. That was exciting. I got a real long letter from Certegy with all the bad checks they'd written. It was like $100 here and there, a couple $100 here. There was a check for $14,000 at a Big Lots, which I didn't even know you could spend $14,000 at a Big Lots. Is that like the whole store? Very exciting. Yeah, they had used my driver's license. Have you guys heard of a service called Turo? Turo? I'd never heard of it. It's like Uber, but you're borrowing the car from, like you're renting a car from someone. Yeah, they gave someone my driver's license, and that person gave them their Tesla, and they were on their merry way. And the Tesla was recovered, abandoned a few days later. They got into a car crash in a BMW and presented my license. So I heard from the other driver's insurance after they finally tracked down my real phone number. Let's see. And in the meantime, I was still trying to get those accounts closed. So Bank of America sent me all this paperwork, and they said, we want you to get this affidavit notarized and photocopy your driver's license and your social security card and just put them in this little physical envelope and mail that back to us. I called Bank of America and I said, I'm a victim of identity theft, and it would be crazy for me to make photocopies of those things and put them in the mail. And the person I spoke to said, we would never ask you to send anything like that. I was holding the piece of paper that said it, and that was when I flipped over into journalist mode and scrawled on the piece of paper the exact quote that she had said, because I thought, I'm going to have to write a story about this. This is crazy. And then I also noticed that the Bank of America paperwork was dated like January 25th and said I had to return it all by February 25th. And I got it on like February 23rd. So I asked why, and she said, oh, this is the second time we've sent it to you. First, we sent it to your main address. I said, the one I told you where the thieves lived? Yes. Yes, that was the first place. Wells Fargo, a very nice man, was like, okay, to close your account, we need you to answer some questions. Have you lived on this street name? How about this street name? Have you associated with this person or this person? And I said, is this the process to open an account or just to close a fraudulent one? He's like, no, just to close it. I had issues getting the hard inquiries removed from the credit bureaus. That's very, very hard to do. This was another scenario where I thought, great, I've got my hard-fought SFBD report, I've got my FBI report, I've got my FTC report. Credit bureaus, here you go. Now you know all those are fake, and so you can take care of it. That was not the case. Yeah, there's like a mountain of paperwork to do. And I would say through all of this, I just kept feeling every time like, one, I had to mount a Supreme Court case defense of myself for a crime I had been so on top of and that I was the victim of, and that it was an unpaid part-time job that I was doing now, that I came home from my full-time job at the LA Times and then was sitting on hold at the bank, dealing with the mountain of paperwork, sending emails, sending letters, calling back debt collectors. It was horrible. And I felt like it would never, ever end. I thought they've got these checkbooks. Who cares that I closed the checking accounts? People are going to follow up on it. And they have my driver's license. You know, I have a new copy of it, but in California, you don't get issued a new driver's license number when you get a new driver's license. So they had what looked like a valid driver's license. And I learned it doesn't, if I'd had like a DUI and, you know, a cop would run my license, that would show up. But it doesn't show up, hey, this, you know, credential was reported stolen and you should maybe ask this person a couple more questions. There's no system like that in place in California right now. So they had like carte blanche to do anything you could imagine doing with someone else's driver's license. I did get lucky. In May, I learned the Berkeley police were trying to reach me. 2 people had been pulled over for suspicious activity in a car and they had found a mountain of stuff in their trunk. There was a Cheez-It box with 12 checkbooks in it, including one with my name on it, a copy of my driver's license. And I requested a copy of that police report as well. And I was just stunned going through it at how many victims there had been. I don't want to say that I felt special, but I thought that someone was stealing just my identity. And I realized the scope of this was so much larger than I had even realized. These people had no idea who I was. They hadn't targeted me for any specific reason. They had not observed my sterling, blemish-free credit report and be like, okay, she is the one we're going to impersonate. Like, they did this to tons of people. But I was like, great, they've been arrested. They went to trial. Trial was in July. They were sentenced to a few months in jail. I thought, great, it's over. And then I got, so that was July. August, I got a phone call on my desk phone at the LA Times, which that phone doesn't ring a ton. So this person spoke to a switchboard operator in our office. It was somebody, he said, my name is Oscar and I'm going to the police right now. My girlfriend tried to kill me and she's stealing your identity. I found mail with your name on it. And I think she's trying to steal your identity. And I asked if it was, because I knew the first 2 people's names because I was contacted about making a victim impact statement and you know, sending that testimony for the court case. I said, was it this woman? Nope, it was a different person. So I said, okay, send me email. Here's my work email. Send me what you have. And he sent me, like photos of a bunch of mail that he'd found that had my name on it to an address that I recognized as having come up on my credit reports. So now I was like, okay, I need to go to the police. I had not gone to the police previously because I thought I made the SFPD report. I've got proof that my wallet was stolen. And I didn't think the police were really gonna like help me. Like, what could they really do? And so I'd been reluctant to go in the first place. But now I thought, okay, I've got a guy like calling me at work. I need to tell someone about this. I went to the West Hollywood Sheriff's Department. The guy said, no, the crime took place up in Richmond, so you need to call the Richmond police. I went home, called the Richmond police. They said, no, the law says, and she cited the code. She's like, it has to originate where the victim lives. So I went back the next day to the West Hollywood police station, and this time I was ready. I had my 2 big file folders with every single piece of mail that I had received throughout all of this. I had my printout of it was like 12 pages at this point, a Google Doc where I had listed every call I had made, the date, the time, the name of the person I had spoke to, and a summary of our phone call. I had all of that ready to go. I had the printouts of the emails that this weird guy had sent me. And the guy behind the desk like sighed heavily when I plopped it all down on the desk. And I said, here's what I've got. Here's what happened. And I gave him the speech I just gave you guys. And he goes, so you believe yourself to be the victim of identity theft? And I slammed my hands down on the counter. I said, I am the victim of identity theft. 2 people are in jail for it. He was like, it was like a Wednesday afternoon. It was totally empty. And he's like, okay, well, we're really busy. So it's going to take a while for anyone to come take your report. I said, that's fine. That's fine. I said, I packed snacks, and I did. And I sat down on the bench across from where he was sitting, and I didn't even look at my phone. I had my big pile of papers in my lap, and I had my little water bottle and my Cliff Bar. And every time he looked up from his desk, I was like, I wasn't going anywhere. So after 45 minutes, another person came out and like very reluctantly took my report. And I was like, I'll be following up. And I did follow up, and there was similar, I heard after about a month, I emailed to be like, I really need a copy of this report for my files and to have it. And he was like, well, there's some confusion because you submitted to us an SFPD report, and then you had a Berkeley police report. And now you're saying this is something in Richmond. And so like, we're confused about what we're supposed to be doing. I'm like, ugh. And I said, did you guys ever refer this up to the Richmond? I didn't think they were going to like organize a posse and drive up and like kick down the door in Richmond to this person's address, but I thought they would make a phone call or like send a fax. No, nothing ever. It's not clear to me even now whether they ever did anything other than very reluctantly send me a PDF of that police report that was just photocopies of everything I had handed to them. Yeah, weird stuff kept happening. I got a call about how my marijuana delivery driver was right outside my hotel room in Petaluma with my order if I could come out. The owner of the marijuana delivery company was the nicest person I dealt with in all of this. I told him what was going on, and it was like I drafted him into my CSI investigation. He's like, I'm going to email you everything that we have, and like all this timestamp stuff. It was so refreshing to have somebody who wanted to help me. And then I called the police in West Hollywood, and I was like asked to speak to the detective, and I was like, guess what? I know exactly where they are, and I've got their address, so you could call the Petaluma police, and maybe they could knock on the door. No, that never happened. On Christmas Day of that year, I got a call from my bank, and they said, we want to go over some suspicious transactions. I'm like, okay. I know what's going on here. And they said, we need you to confirm your name and your address. Yeah. And they said, and for verification, we need you to say what your banking password is. And I felt it like form on the tip of my tongue, and then like through my holiday wine buzz, just this dull like blink at the back of my mind, like my password. And I just hung up the phone. I was like, wow, they are trying to scam me on Christmas Day. That is crazy. A few days later, I got a phone call from the Vacaville police. This is a great geography tour of California for everyone here. Call from the Vacaville police. 2 people were arrested. They pulled them over for something else in a car and found a bunch of weird stuff in the trunk. And I said, can I guess their names? She was really surprised. I guess that's not what most victims say when they call. I guess the first 2 people, no, not them. I said, how about the name of the guy who called me and his supposed ex-girlfriend? Oh, yes, that was them. And I said, I've got some things to email you. That has been kind of the end of it. When I tried to apply for a mortgage in 2020, I had to unfreeze my credit, obviously. And I told the mortgage people up front, I said, I'm a victim of identity theft. You're going to pull weird stuff on my credit report that's not me, that I'm still in the process of disputing. And let me know the absolute last minute that I can unfreeze my credit. And then let me know when I can freeze it again, because I think these people are pretty brutal. I unfroze it on like a Friday afternoon, and at 2:00 in the morning, I got a text from my bank saying, congratulations on applying for your new checking account. By the way, we see you've added a new mobile number and a new email address. I called my bank the next day in tears. I said, I had to unfreeze my credit. How do I stop this from happening? What can I add to my bank account to not have this happen? And the person very breezily went, well, if we could prevent all incidents of fraud from happening, we would, but we can't. It's like, oh, thanks. Fantastic. So I refroze my credit. Oh, I also learned my credit was not frozen anymore with TransUnion. The thieves had called and successfully gotten it unfrozen. So I refroze with all 3, and it has remained that way ever since. But that was the last time they actively tried something that I'm aware of, but I've continued to fight with the credit bureaus. And then, yeah, I published a big story where I talked about all of this on the front page of the LA Times.
Wow.
We love that about you.
Yeah.
Thanks. And even I spoke at length. I first started reporting this in 2019, then we follow up, we talk again, 2022. And yeah, then I wrote a whole big story about it.
Well, that is about as nightmarish a scenario of identity theft as I can possibly think of. And just judging by the gasps and things that we heard from the audience, it probably triggered in everybody some sort of a response. Something went through your mind. And so time for a little audience participation. First, bottle up whatever you felt for a second, and let's think about something else. You get a call from your bank asking you about suspicious charges on your credit card, and you realize that you absolutely didn't make those. So somebody has stolen your credit card and went on a little shopping spree. The bank tells you they're going to take care of those charges, but they're going to have to reissue you a card. Word association. How do you feel about that? Anybody feel worried? How about violated? Angry? Yeah, a few more coming up. Okay, now put yourselves in her shoes. 2019, 2020. Going through what she just described. You're a complete and total victim of identity theft. Every aspect of who you are has been abused by someone else. Show of hands. Would you feel vulnerable? A lot of hands. Sad or depressed? embarrassed? Maybe you feel shame about what's happened? Eva, question. ITRC, one of the great things that they put out is a victim impact report where they actually look at and talk to the victims that they serve, aggregate that into some really useful insights and data about the emotional impacts of identity theft. What did you think? Any surprises based on how folks responded?
That actually, this little focus group we did is really in keeping with what we saw in last year's aftermath report, because ITRC victims, these are the people that call us and that have more complex cases, that they're dealing with things much more similar to what Jessica went through. The general population, it's a little bit more of a broader swath. So more of those more easily remediated cases, things like charges on an existing credit card, where you're just making one phone call or maybe two to a specific financial institution or card issuer asking for a new card. So it takes much less time. Those folks, 55% felt worried or anxious, 47% felt violated, 36% felt angry. That's about what we saw here. But then when we asked you to put yourself in Jessica's shoes, a lot more hands went up, because the victims that contacted us that were dealing with complex cases, oh, and of course, my phone, because I have my passcode on here, went down, so I need to read the percentages. Okay, those folks, 80% felt worried or anxious, 74% violated, 72% angry, and almost half sad or depressed. This is the stat, some of you have probably heard this from me before, but 10% felt suicidal. So we had 10% of folks that were having, I can't say a similar experience to Jessica's, because probably the minutia of the incident was different, but it's that kind of pervasive, ongoing, never knowing when the other shoe was going to fall, waking up in the morning and going, hey, it's Christmas, and they're going to try to scam me and steal my identity again on Christmas. So that's 10% of these folks that are going through that, who felt like ending their life was an option to get away from what was happening to them. So I love that experiment. I think it really brings home the emotional impact of this crime.
Jessica, hearing what Eva just covered in terms of what ITRC studies, was one of those particularly an outstanding, pervasive feeling for you throughout this ordeal? Were there some that we missed, like adjectives that we haven't even discussed yet?
I just remember feeling, especially in the early months of it, when I was getting mail every single day, I felt dread. I would come home and I would feel, even as I went to check my mailbox, like my heart would start pounding, and I would feel like a ringing in my head, and just overwhelmingly anxious. And I even feel that way today when I wind up on like bank hold music. I feel the same stress and anxiety of, I am stuck on this and no one's going to be able to help me, and I'm going to have a super frustrating conversation with a person who doesn't care and is giving me the third degree, and it's there. I just kept feeling like I had nothing to do with this. This was, someone stole my identity, and then some banks let them open these accounts, and I wasn't involved at all. And now it's my responsibility to sort all this out. I felt angry. I felt really, really angry a lot of the time.
I think we can all certainly appreciate the emotional response, but was it limited to just that for you? Just an emotional
No, I was physically unbelievably stressed out. I remember reading in the previous year's report, people having trouble sleeping. I definitely felt that way. I felt like that this is never going to end. How could it end? And I remember seeing a therapist. I had previously been seeing a therapist and seeing her at the time. And of course, this always happens. You get victimized at the worst times. And they stole my wallet. I'd had a miscarriage a couple months earlier, and I was trying to get pregnant again, and it wasn't happening. And my therapist said, I think it's because of the stress of what you're going through. She said, you've been so violated and you are so stressed out about it. So yeah, I wrote that in my victim impact statement to them, that that's what had happened. I said, I think you guys, to the criminals, I said, I think you guys feel like this was a victimless crime, that you skimmed someone's credit card information, and it's not. I felt really violated. I've had a lot of stress because of this, and you might be taking away my chance to be someone's mother. It was horrible.
Eva, what does ITRC see with regards to the physical toll that identity theft takes on a victim?
Well, like Jessica, 92% of the respondents had sleep problems. 88% said they felt stressed. And then there's just the persistent aches, pains, 42%. Changes in eating and drinking habits, 36%. So, in addition to the emotional, we're a complete system. So of course we're going to have physical um, symptoms from going through this. And while Jessica's story is really, I mean, boy, talk about a concrete lesson that this crime could have stopped her from being somebody's mother. Can you please break the news to them that
My story does have a happy ending, which is that I went on maternity leave last year. I had a baby on February 2nd, so almost exactly.
yay, thank you.
Thank you.
But the reality is there are a lot of folks who are dealing with these physical symptoms ongoing. And I always like to make the point that with the millions of people that are going through, tens of millions of people that are experiencing this crime every year, and the dismissive nature of the systems, not the ITRC, of course, but of a lot of the systems that people are interacting with, you've got millions of people that you're engaging with every day. Maybe the person serving you your coffee, maybe your hairdresser. Now, that's a horrifying thought, right, ladies? My hairdresser is sleep deprived and super stressed while cutting my hair. Please, no. And I make light of it, but I really do want to make the point. Maybe it's your doctor or your dentist. You're encountering people on a regular basis who are dealing with the emotional and physical symptoms of this crime. We just don't talk about it because we are still dismissive. We don't think it's a big deal because it's not a violent crime. And so we don't have open conversations about it.
I remember saying to someone, I said, if these people had held me up at gunpoint and stolen my wallet, it would have been traumatic, but it would have ended. Like that would have been it, and I could have recovered from it. And instead, it was a recurring thing that came up over and over again, that even a year and a half later, trying to apply for a mortgage, which is stressful enough as it is, I was dealing with this all over again and being totally dismissed by my bank about it. It was horrible.
One of the most poignant aspects of your story, Jessica, were the obstacles you ran into with multiple jurisdictions of local law enforcement. Drill down on that a little bit. Like explain how that really frustrated your effort to clear your name.
Right. So of course, with the police, I mean, I said I felt like, well, the police, I wasn't going to report it at all because the police weren't going to help me, and I was right. Police, I talk about this in my story, and I spoke to a criminal law professor who elucidated a bit more on this. But police are primarily concerned with crimes that happen in their own jurisdiction, crimes that are tracked, that they're sort of quote unquote graded on in terms of crime reporting, which ID theft is not, and crimes that they can clear. And ID theft is none of those things. The cops are not equipped to solve a digital cyber financial crime that takes place over multiple jurisdictions. I asked the criminal law professor that I spoke to, I said, how does identity theft, what happened to me, how does this crime stack up to like a bank heist? Which one's easier to solve if you had all the tools you needed? And I thought she was going to say a bank heist because there was a physical crime and there's video evidence. She said, no. She said, what happened to you would be way easier to solve. These people use computers. They have, IP addresses. These are financial transactions, and those all have numbers and they're traceable. She said, this crime should be much easier to solve. Police are not equipped to solve it, and so they don't. And so they don't even want to take your report because I'm another case that they did not clear that year.
For those of you who don't know, Eva has a pretty extensive background in law enforcement herself. And so next question to tee up for you, thinking of Jessica's story, like, what's the fix? Like, how do you get law enforcement to care and prioritize when someone like Jessica walks in with her stack of her case and says, help me? Like, is there a fix to that?
There actually is a fix. And the big part of the problem is that they aren't properly resourced. We have jurisdictional issues, and there is a lot of finger pointing. But one of the reasons that there is this finger pointing, no, go here, it has to be where you live, no, it has to be where the crime occurred. Those issues exist, but we don't properly incentivize the individual agencies to go ahead and take that report and not worry about the clearance rate. For some really, really small agencies, it is about manpower, but that can be resolved digitally. There can be processes that are implemented to put the police report in the hands of these victims. But until we look at those clearance rate issues, because for a lot of jurisdictions, and I'm not talking about just California, we have to look across the country. There are over 17,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States, including state, federal, and local law enforcement agencies. So we don't have a good universal process for them. But when their funding is apportioned either from the federal budget or from the state budget, and they are looking at those clearance rates. Well, if they are taking massive numbers of identity theft or identity fraud cases in and not clearing those, that can actually impact their funding and already resource constrained budgets. That's a huge problem. But I do think that can be, I shouldn't say easily, but it's a defined problem, so we can address it. Now we're incentivizing these officers to take the report and know that they can help the victim even if they can't investigate the case. They're very likely not even going to be able to begin an investigation because there isn't enough evidence in most cases. Your case is different. They left a huge digital trail of breadcrumbs. It could have been investigated. Clearly it was, because some of the thieves were finally discovered and prosecuted and held accountable. But to me, more resources for the departments in order for them to be able to provide the reports, and then not creating a system that de-incentivizes them from providing those reports is going to be key. And the last thing I'll say on this is that the ITRC, we now have a federal grant from the Department of Justice to work directly with law enforcement agencies and provide victim services. So we are being embedded. Our live chat is being embedded on their websites and other digital presence. And we have MOUs with them where they're sending the victims directly to us. So they don't feel like, oh, taking this police report is now going to take me 2 to 3 hours for this victim because I have to provide services and walk them through the process. They can simply give them the report and then send them to us, and we will spend that time with the victim walking them through that process. And it's starting to work. We've got 11, we just started this project. We've already got 11 MOUs signed, and 4 agencies have embedded our live chat on their website.
That's great. I do want to leave a few minutes for audience questions, but the last subject area that I'd like to talk on is, and ask you guys a few more questions on, is this idea that I think we're all pretty familiar with, and that's that identity crimes aren't just like flashes in the pan, right? It's not like you get it stolen, something bad happens, it's erased, it goes away. You certainly just heard that from Jessica. In other words, it's a really long tail that stretches out over a long period of time. And more often than not, once your identity is stolen once, the odds are of it happening again pretty high. Jessica, I think you've already alluded to this a little bit, but yes, you've been able to get to a point where you're still experiencing triggering emotions when you hear bank hold music. You were able to get the mortgage though, right?
Yes. Yes, I was. The mortgage thing worked out, but I asked so because I had alerts set up and because they had happened to target a bank that I used, I got the notification right away and was able to get it cleared up. But I asked my lender after that, I said, if they had opened a new checking account or a new credit card, would that have affected my ability to get the mortgage, even though I told you guys this was happening? They said, yes, we probably wouldn't have been able to give it to you. And if I had been in the process of applying for a mortgage in early 2019, when those bad checks were still being written all the time, I don't think I ever would have been able to get a mortgage.
So then we're a few years out from like the heat of battle, right? But how is your life still being affected by what happened to you in late 2018, 2019?
I've had persistent issues getting this information removed from my credit reports. I had to set up, so the hospital where I gave birth, Cedars-Sinai, excellent. Their login system uses an additional layer of identity verification when you set up your account to settle your bill with them. And to set that up, they ask you questions like, is this a street you've lived on? Is this a street you've lived on? I had to go into my now 27-page long Google Doc and look at the addresses that were still in my credit report from the thieves to be like, yes, that address in Richmond is a place that I have lived, because according to Cedars-Sinai's verification system, it still is. I was just looking, I went on Monday to double check and see what was in there, and have had issues filing disputes, issues getting it resolved. Equifax doesn't let you dispute things on your credit report for identity theft online. TransUnion was like, here's your credit report, and it was a blank page. And I opened the chat to be like, hey, I'm getting and I turned off pop-up blocker and turned off like any browser things, still was a blank page. And I opened the little chat window to be like, can you please email me or mail me a copy? And it took so long for anyone to respond to me that it triggered logging me totally out of TransUnion. Let's see, I wrote all my emails here. Oh no, it's Experian that won't let you dispute identity theft online. And Equifax was like, yes, you can dispute, no problem. Upload your documentation here. And so I uploaded the police report and everything. And the file size max is 3 megabytes, which is very low. And every single document I tried to upload went over it, and it not only was like re-upload it, but reset me back to the first page to start the report all over again. And then I know how to downsize a file. I don't think that's a skill set every victim of identity theft has. And I think a lot of people would have been like, I don't know what 3 megabytes means. I don't know how to get it under 3 megabytes. Never mind. I'm just going to deal with it. And, you know, I have, since publishing my story, my inbox is like an encyclopedia of other people's identity theft stories. And someone wrote to me and said, yeah, something similar happened to me. I just declared bankruptcy. I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't keep making the phone calls. I couldn't fight back every single one. I just mulliganed my whole financial life, basically.
Eva, ITRC studies the concept of re-victimization. What are your stats show?
Well, unfortunately, we are seeing the re-victimization rate. It's actually plateaued between 2022 and 2021, but boy, in 2021, it was up to almost 30%. That's, you know, 3 out of every 10 people has been a previous victim. And I don't know of any other crime type other than interpersonal crimes like domestic violence where you have a re-victimization rate that high. Usually, lightning strikes once, not 3 times. And you know, it's almost hard to categorize and quantify, because even in Jessica's case, we could say that this is a re-victimization. You've been a victim once because one set of perpetrators was caught, and then another set of perpetrators has been identified. So, okay, you've been victimized twice. But the reality is, doesn't it feel like it's just been ongoing for years? Maybe it's in remission. When I talk to victims, they do liken this crime to a medical condition where, you know what, it never really goes away. It's never really resolved. It just goes into remission, but I know it could come back at any time. So even how we're categorizing and quantifying re-victimization it's a challenge, and we need to get better at it, but still 3 out of every 10 people has been a previous victim. That's insane. We can do better.
In our conversations, many times we've spoken, you introduced me to that concept of it being like a chronic condition, and that really rang true for me. And I also know, you know, these people applied for they applied for car loans, they applied for payday loans, they applied any possible way you can extract money from some sort of financial institution. And so now all those institutions have my information. And a reader emailed me and said, I work for an insurance company, and that car crash that they got into, there's a database of people who've been something like, Clue. And so your information's also going to be in there. And he's like, I don't think that they would necessarily mark, oh, by the way, this person didn't do it and it was somebody else who was using their identity. And so I have Delete Me now, and I use LifeLock as well, because I know I'm at a huge risk of being a victim again. And neither of those are cheap. And that's, again, that's all at my expense.
Final question for Jessica. You've described just a whole host of areas where the system failed you as a victim. Which one stands out as the most painful or frustrating that you had to deal with throughout this process?
The credit bureaus were the most frustrating. The fact that I have continued to have issues to dispute these problems and to get the results of the dispute and just get this information off of there. It has been so difficult. And it's interesting. I knew what the credit bureaus were prior to this. I knew they had given me a very good grade, which I like to have. But I guess I really hadn't internalized the fact that they are private businesses, but you cannot opt out of them unless you opt out of having a financial life in the United States. And so I think I felt frustrated and continue to feel frustrated. Like this is this private business that has all my information and tracks my every financial move. But when I need help, I wasn't able to get it.
Well, we've got time in about a minute or two if there are any questions. John in the back and Mary up front.
On? Okay, great. Jessica, thank you for sharing your story. It's obviously been very painful for you, and so kudos to you for being so willing to be upfront about it. But I have to ask, as a reporter, as somebody who writes about this and many other things, have you spent a lot of time talking to your colleagues about your experience? And I ask that for a very specific reason, which is one of the things that I think Eva and others have talked about, that police departments don't care. Other people, just kind of brush you off. And I think a lot of that stems from a culture of victim blaming we have about fraud in our society. And so I'm curious if in your own writing about this, or in talking to other people in your profession who have written about fraud, you've talked about how they write about it, how they write about fraud victims, the words they use, avoiding things like duped or scammed, and really talking about them as the victims of crimes that they are. Sorry, that was more of a speech than a question, but I would love your thoughts on that.
No, I think that's a great question. And, I work on this utility journalism team. And actually, I talked to Jeremy last night. His first question was, oh, do you work with John Healy? And he is an editor on my team. And my team does write stories about like Venmo and Zelle scams. We were talking about, we're just working on something on the proliferation of the, here's your order for XYZ, not you, click this link to fill out this form and let us know. And yeah, that is something that we've talked about. And I think there is a big culture of victims blaming themselves. And I think that is why this crime is so underreported. I remember when I was talking to you about it, I said, I feel like I didn't do anything wrong. Well, except that I could have kept a closer eye on my wallet.
I didn't watch my purse, and I guess I should have. It was almost like this knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, it's very pervasive.
So yeah, I wouldn't say I've had like a formalized newsroom-wide conversation or memo or anything about it, but I think that's very true. And as a victim, yeah, there were even small ways that I did blame myself. And I know that's really not a unique experience.
Jeremy, can we fit in one more question? Okay, Mary?
Jessica, after you wrote the article that managed to get on the front page of your newspaper, did you name the banks or the credit bureaus, and did you get a better response from them after the entire news story was published?
Yes, I named them in my news story, and no, they never got back to me. I kind of thought they would. Once again, seem to have overestimated how much they cared about my problem. But I really thought, because I mentioned specifically Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, here's what happened. And I thought they would either respond and say, we saw the article and we're sorry, or, we don't think that that's what happened. And you're going to need to provide, your paperwork, and our lawyers want to talk to your lawyers about these accusations. And neither of those things happened. I had reached out to them before the story came out, asking for like an on the record response to any of this. And they declined. They all declined to comment. Equifax, I asked about like the Equifax hack and whether that could have been where the thieves got my social security information from. And I got like a statement that said, we are not aware of this information for sale on the dark web. And then I said, do you want to comment further about my story? No.
Well, as we get ready to break for lunch, that is some serious food for thought. Eva, thank you. Yeah. Eva, thank you for having me here. But most importantly, Jessica, thank you for being here to share your story.
So we are going to break for lunch now. We have a buffet set up outside. This was a both great and terrible way, but thank you for sharing, Jessica, to I think help frame where we are in the morning. A lot of what we try to do in the afternoon is pivot to talking about potential solutions. So we'll come back around 12:40 or so when Congressman Foster gets here for a lunchtime keynote. But in the meantime, please get something to eat. Thank you.